Welcome. This video is going to break down Neutral Tones by Thomas Hardy, the fifth poem in the Love and Relationships collection for AQA GCSE English Lit. I'm here to show you the crucial information that you need for the poem, and then I'm going to show you what you can do with this information to make sure it stays in the long-term memory. This is the short version of this. If you want to hear the full version, check out my video on When We Two Parted or Sonnet 29. The headings that you see here are organised so you can easily compare aspects of poetry and hit all of the criteria you need to in the exam. This allows you to learn and revise the feelings of a particular poem, for instance, to compare it with the feelings in any other poem. The same for the endings and all the rest. It doesn't make sense to learn it any other way. You can use these headings to create a mind map, and if you do, you can use a template like this. There are more details of how to learn all of this in the next step section, and there are also timestamps for all of the sections down below. First up, the poem explores the breakup of a relationship and the very moment that it happens, and the setting of where it happens keeps recurring in the poet's memory, showing its significance. Loss of love is the subject of the poem, and the tone implied by the title is neutral, which would suggest that he has no strong feelings on the matter. This is not true, and his feelings are deeply pessimistic and melancholic. From the very title then, we have neutral representing not his feelings as such, which, as you'll see, are far from neutral, but an emptiness where the joy should be in his life. This is a lyric poem. It's a personal story, and by its nature, it's one-sided. Beginning and ending. The poem has a cyclical structure, meaning the ending is linked to the beginning. The opening stanza has a pond. The sun was chidden of God. There are leaves that were grey from an ash tree. The final two lines of the poem have the same features. The God-cursed sun and a tree and a pond edged with greyish leaves. With the passing of time, the details are compressed from a whole quatrain to 2 lines, as if everything else has been squeezed out of him. The cyclical nature conveys a sense that he's trapped in this moment and this emotion, and he can't escape. His feelings about love remain as they did that day. The God-cursed sun and chidden of God combine to give an impression that there is some kind of punishment that Hardy feels. The word cursed is an unusual, archaic or old-fashioned spelling of cursed, and Hardy deliberately uses this version because it draws attention to the curse. The T on the end is a crisper, meaner sound and makes the end of the word plosive. This is a sound that is bitter. To make a plosive sound, you have to close the lips or teeth and then blow air across, making the T sound. The word chidden is also archaic, which develops the idea of the curse lasting forever, but it still exists today in the word chide, meaning told off, scolded or rebuked. The word is still plosive, the D being formed in the same way in the mouth as a T, but it's softer, more resigned to its fate. These words, wrapping up the beginning and ending, really give the whole poem a sense of doom and melancholy, a helplessness about a situation that cannot be resolved. There is a measured regularity in the stanza structure in contrast to the emotions. He uses quatrains with the rhyming scheme of A, B, B, A throughout, so the first and last lines of each stanza rhyme, which could suggest how his mind always comes back to this moment and mirrors the cyclical structure of the whole poem. This return is emphasised by the way each last line is indented, like he's further along but always returns. This also affects the pace, slowing it down and lending the whole poem its melancholy air. It's worth pointing out that the first 3 stanzas are all concerned with the moment of separation, and the ellipsis, for any fans of punctuation out there, ends the 3rd stanza, following from the ominous bird a wing. This symbolises their relationship flying off, ending, and offering a solemn omen, a sign that the rest of Hardy's life is never getting better, at least in his eyes. Before we get onto the language section, if you're finding this useful, please subscribe and help me bring more of these videos to you. When we're talking about the main image, we're looking at the most important element of the poem. In this poem, Hardy uses natural imagery of winter, starting the poem with, "We stood by a pond that winter day." It's metaphorically cold, symbolically lifeless, as nothing grows in the winter, and this reflects his relationship. It's dead and not growing. This echoes through the greyish leaves, symbolising how they are no longer part of the growth. This is also the most obvious link to the neutral tones of the title, grey being a neutral colour, neither black nor white, but the neutral is not indifferent. It's not apathetic, meaning showing no concern. Instead, it's dying, or it's in a state of stasis. It's grey, and it stays that way, which is kind of tragic, really. Water is often used symbolically to show rebirth or washing away an old life. In this case, though, Hardy uses it to show the antithesis of this. The exact opposite is what we're presented with. The water is stagnant. It's a pond. It's going nowhere, and it's washing nothing away. The tree is an ash, a tree that loses its leaves in winter. The word ash also carries connotations of being burned and consumed, exactly how he feels, and it also carries the colour overtones of the grey leaves, linking it back to the title, the neutral tones. Relationships are really about the metaphorical distance between people, so it's useful to look at how the language shows the distance between the speaker and his former lover. Here we see the distance between them as painful. They are together, but apart. As they stand there by the pond, the gap is palpable, it's intense, and it's loaded with resentment. Some words played between us. Hardy is here using irony, saying one thing but meaning the opposite. The irony is that the metaphorical play is the opposite of what they're doing. There's no enjoyment, there's no fun, there's no ludic or playful quality to this situation. If love is a game, Hardy certainly feels like the loser in this one. Let's consider how the language reveals feelings. I said at the start that the feeling is not really neutral, and we've already seen the irony of the use in the word playful. The use of opposites doesn't end there, though, and there are a lot of juxtapositions and oxymorons in the poem. Oxymorons are where apparently contradictory terms are joined together, so tedious riddles is a good example. A riddle is supposed to be fun, a puzzle to be worked out, but the word tedious gives the feeling of being too long, too tiresome, too dull. This isn't the love part of the relationship. He never mentions any high points, but instead tells us that they must have argued and conflicted with each other a great deal. The third stanza is full of oxymorons and contrasts, so let's pick them apart. The smile on your mouth was the deadest thing. This is a juxtaposition of what one might expect to be joyful, smile, with the superlative deadest thing. The smile isn't just dead, which is usually a binary quality, you're either alive or dead, but the deadest thing. Nothing could be more lifeless. The misery is almost comical, but I don't think Hardy is doing this in a clever, witty way like the Smiths or something. I also like the blurriness of the word thing at the end. It's loaded with disdain, as he's not even willing to give it a name. Alive enough to have strength to die is a good example of antithesis, using opposite ideas in a balanced way. Hardy presents the line with alive at the start and die at the end, so we can see the progression through his relationship. The expression could be a definition for the word moribund, being in a dying state or just on the edge of death. Death is going to happen, but we know this is a cyclical poem. Time moves on. The final stanza uses the present tense to show the passing of time. The pathos, the pity then, is in the fact that Hardy has felt in this moribund state for the rest of his life. The final one, grin of bitterness, is a clear oxymoron. The grin, which should be of joy, of carefree happiness, a lightness of tone, counteracting the bitterness, which carries a sense of acrimony and resentment that he felt looking at her. So all in all, not a jolly one then. It is, however, a great poem to use in comparison and a great poem to learn in detail because there are so many techniques that clearly link to the poet's feelings and so many links with other poems. So please hang around as we go into the next steps. The best thing to do to get a picture of the whole poem is to create a mind map of it. Use the headings I've provided here and you'll have a 6-pronged mind map, which is crucial to know in advance of starting your mind map as it's going to make spacing it out a whole bunch easier. I will always use the same headings so you can keep making mind maps of the poems, keep the format the same, which is going to make comparing them a lot easier too. Please check out my video on creating mind maps if you're unsure how to make them. I've mocked up a template here though if you want to use it. If you're trying to learn quotations, and I really would for this poem, the most effective way is to get the individual bits of information on flashcards. I'm going to put the information on screen in a moment for what goes on each flashcard, and remember, they are two-sided, so that's why there are two columns. The cards need to be identified with the name of the poem, so you need to identify them in some way. I've put that in initials in the top corner. If you don't do that, you get confused when you add to the cards with quotations from other poems. The meaning side can be put in your own words if you wish, but don't use any of the same words as the quotation or term, or it will be too easy. I've worded the cards as having a desirable difficulty, a tiny bit of difficulty, so that when you turn them over, you can be precise about what you're learning. And if you don't get it 100%, remember you can't half know something. Making the flashcards is step one to learning them. So I'll link my video guide to making and using flashcards in the description. That gives you a guide to the lightness system, which concentrates your learning on the ones you don't know. So it's a really effective way of learning information quickly. I've used it to learn more stuff than I ever thought I could learn. So give it a go and you'll surprise yourself. I intend to do all the poems in this collection, so keep an eye out for the rest of them. You made it all the way to the end. Well done, thank you. Make use of your flashcards, and I look forward to the next poem.